All right, so here we go. Hopefully you remember these from chapter 1, absolute value inequalities. So we would write two equations, m minus 4 equals 6, m minus 4 equals negative 6, and solve the two. Add 4, m equals 10, add 4, m equals negative 2, and then we had two solutions. Again, that was from chapter 1. If we had something outside the absolute value, we would deal with that first before we would solve the equation. So we would divide by negative 6 on both sides to isolate the absolute value, then split it into two equations. From there were a couple of other things that popped up with this, namely, if you had absolute value equal to a negative number, that was a no solution, so we didn't have to bother with this part, it was just no solution. So hopefully all of this is jogging some memories, because what we're going to talk about now is absolute value inequalities. So a lot of the things that we talked about are going to be in play. You are going to write two equations. You're going to separate them. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative with one other change. So here we go. If you can't see this, here's the equation. Write this down. We still split it into two equations, just like we did with the equal signs. Keep it exactly as is for the first equation. Exactly as is, no changes. For the other equation, the stuff inside the absolute value doesn't change. The other side, the other stuff changes. Change the sign, change the sign. Change the inequality, change the sign of the answer. That's how you do it. Solve both equations. Minus 7. X is less than or equal to negative 5. Over here. X is greater than or equal to negative 9. All right? So, that part's easy enough. Now, there's one other thing you need to know and you need to remember, because obviously we've been graphing these problems all along. We're going to continue to graph these. So I have negative 5 and negative 9. How do I know where to graph, where to shade? Well, this right here, because it has the equal to part, that tells me it's going to be a closed circle both times. This, a less than sign, means and. So that means you shade between. So, write that down in your notes. Less than or equal or less than, you shade between. This is an and problem. Forgot to write that in there. Greater than or equal, greater than, you shade the outside part. You say the tails. That's an or problem. We talked about and or problems last week. So that is not a new concept. If you don't remember and ors, go back and watch the videos from last week. So this is a less than sign, so I am shading and, I am shading between the two values of my answers. That's how we do it. Let's do another one. If I'm going too fast, pause the video so you can keep up with your writing. Here we go. 8x minus 11 is less than 0. So, split it into two equations. Zero's kind of funky, isn't it? So here we go. Got to switch those brains on. We got to use some common sense. We got to think a little bit here. Can an absolute value of anything. What is absolute value? Distance from zero. Can a distance be less than 0? Is it possible for a distance to be less than 0? Well, less than 0 is negative. I can't have a negative distance. It's not possible. So I don't need to work this out. There's no solution. It'll never happen. An absolute value cannot be less than 0. Now, if this symbol was turned the other direction, if it was a greater than sign, an absolute value greater than 0, yeah, you can work that out. As a matter of fact, all absolute values are greater than 0. So we're going to see this pop up. Your absolute value and greater than or less than signs, it's not automatic like an equals sign was. I'll show you what I'm talking about, but it's probably something we're going to have to talk about face to face. So next, let's do number 2. And we just did that one. Same idea here. I'll write it down so you can read it. Absolute value less than -1. Can an absolute value be less than -1? Well, -1, less than, that's all negatives. No, right away, I know less than -1 is a no solution answer. Can't happen. If we had an absolute value greater than -1, well, everything's going to be greater than -1 because this is always going to come out to be a positive number. Positive number is always greater than a negative number. So if you had this, this would be all reals, or I think they call it infinite solutions on Big Ideas. Infinite. Every number you could ever plug in here is going to work. So you got to be careful. It's not automatic with a negative number that it's a no solution answer. The direction of the sign matters a lot. So be careful. It's not automatic with a negative number that it's no solution. You got to think about it. All right. So, we touched on it in the beginning. Remember, I've got to take care of the stuff outside the absolute value. I got to deal with this, I got to deal with that before I start writing 2 equations. So, if I had this, what would you do? Well, first thing I would do is subtract 1. Second thing I would do is divide by 4. Think about this as 4 times the absolute value plus 1. This and this are the same ideas here. So when I go to isolate this absolute value, I'm doing the same thing. Minus 1 on both sides. This is still 4 times the absolute value. I'm isolating the absolute value. Now I need to isolate this. Divide by 4. You cannot distribute into an absolute value sign. Not allowed. So here, gone, gone. I still have not done anything with the absolute value. I haven't touched it yet. It's still there. How do I get rid of an absolute value? That happens when I split it into 2 equations. So now I can get rid of the absolute value. Remember, keep exactly what's in here. Don't change anything. So I have 2x minus 5 greater than 5. The first one you write is exactly as it appears. The second one you write, change the inequality, change the sign. 2 changes. So again, deal with the outside stuff first. You can't distribute. The way I get rid of the 4 is by dividing by 4. I haven't gotten rid of the absolute value signs yet. That only happens when I break it into 2 equations. Now, give myself some room up here. I have 2 equations. I I can solve these two equations. Add 5 to both sides, divide, add 5 to both sides, divide. So I go back to this original problem. This was a greater than, which means this is an or answer. So when I graph, here's 0, here's 5. Less than 0, greater than 5. That's your final answer. Take your time. Some of these problems do get a little longer, some of them are quick and easy. Don't get rid of the absolute value until you split it into two equations. Once you split it up, then you can get rid of the absolute value sign. And then you just have to use common sense when it comes to greater than or less than the negatives. Good luck. We're going to spend 2 days on this topic. We're also going to be reviewing. You're going to have an assessment on Thursday.